Beck. Here. Carter. Here. Fitzwater. Gannon. Here. Rowden. Razor. Thompson Raider.
All right, we have a quorum. We're going to begin the hearing with Senate Bill 1032 and Senate Bill 1081. If both senators would like to come up and present, I think these bills are substantially similar, and then we'll be able to have all the witnesses come up at once as well. So, senators, proceed when ready.
Good morning. So good morning, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Senator Carla Eslinger, representing the 33rd Senatorial District. Senate Bill 1032 helps protect one of our most vulnerable populations, our children. And right now, there are about 23,000 children that experience cardiac arrest outside of a hospital each year. And 40% of these cardiac arrests are sports-related. Senate Bill 1032 would take meaningful steps to make sure our children get the life-saving care they need if they have a cardiac arrest while in our schools or at a school sporting event. Senate Bill 1032 would take 3 distinct actions. 1, school will be required to develop and implement a cardiac emergency response plan to respond to cardiac incidents on their campus. Each school with an athletic department or organized athletic program will be required to develop and implement a cardiac emergency response plan to respond to incidents at extracurricular activities, events, or school-sponsored events. And each school required to work with local emergency services providers to integrate their cardiac emergency response plan into the local emergency service providers' protocols. You can find the minimum standards that would be in the cardiac emergency response plan in Section 4 of this bill that includes implementation of an automated external defibrillator. And believe we have some expert witnesses here, should be here to go into detail about these guidelines and how they match guidelines set by the American Heart Association and other national organizations. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to present my bill, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And I believe Senator Arthur now will present hers.
Good morning. For the record, Senator Lauren Arthur representing the 17th Senatorial District. I'm not going to repeat what the Senator has already said so eloquently, but I'll just reinforce why this is necessary. I think we've all seen a headline like this before. High school student collapses at football game or track meet or summer training camp. In fact, headlines like this are becoming far too familiar. When you're watching a high school volleyball game or chaperoning a school dance, often the last thing anyone is thinking about is the possibility that someone will have a sudden cardiac arrest emergency. However, sudden cardiac arrest is the leading cause of death for student athletes, so schools should be prepared. And having a cardiac emergency response plan can increase sudden cardiac arrest survival rates by 50% or more by enabling a team of trained school staff to respond and take action. By passing this legislation, schools will be better prepared, and they'll hopefully be able to avoid one of the most heartbreaking events to happen on a school campus, which of course is the death of a student. So thank you very much for your time and consideration, and we're happy to take questions.
Thank you, Senators, for those explanations. Any questions for the bill sponsors from the committee? Yes, Senator, please proceed.
Mostly just a comment. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. We did a bill a few years ago about seizures, but this is great that you're bringing this forward and protecting our kids and actually everyone that's in that school setting. So thank you.
Further questions for the bill sponsors? Seeing none. Thank you again for those presentations. We'll now go to witnesses in support. And please remember to fill out a witness card and also make sure the microphone is on and audible. And proceed when ready.
Chair, members of the committee, Mara Gray on behalf of the American Heart Association, testifying in support for both Senate Bill 1032 and 1081. Wanted to first and foremost, again, also thank Senator Arthur and Senator Eslinger for bringing forth this legislation. As Senator Eslinger mentioned, 23,000 children experience sudden cardiac arrest outside of a hospital every single year, and a total of 359,000 people will experience sudden cardiac arrest outside of a hospital, and only about 40% of those individuals will receive help before an emergency responder arrives. So the reason our organization supports these plans is because they increase bystander CPR and AED usage, they increase preparedness for these sudden cardiac arrests, and also double survival chances. We also know that in schools with AEDs, 70% of children will survive their sudden cardiac arrest, and that's actually 7 times the overall survival rate. And so this legislation works to turn bystanders into lifesavers so that in a time of cardiac emergency, anyone, anywhere is prepared and empowered to become a vital link in the chain of survival. I did want to mention that this isn't for a what-if scenario like Senator Arthur had mentioned. These are cases that are happening in Missouri. So I just wanted to share one case that was recently featured in the Kansas City Business Journal. Sherry Taylor of Oak Grove. Sherry was cleaning out the high school concession stand to prepare for the upcoming season when, without warning, she collapsed. Fortunately, 2 other parents helping were nurses and recognized she was in cardiac arrest and performed CPR until the ambulance arrived. She spent 10 days in the hospital and made a full recovery. So we just want to make sure that schools are prepared for these scenarios. So we hope that every school across our state is prepared for this type of event, especially when fellow parents, volunteers who are nurses are not present. Hopefully you all received a school checklist. Schools will be provided this checklist. It kind of overlines what would be included in the cardiac emergency response plan. As the Senator mentioned, things like integrating and making sure that an AED is on site, making sure that it adheres to national guidelines, but most of the protocols will be up to the school itself. It won't be dictated by the department. That will be between the school itself and EMS, because they will also be integrated into local EMS protocols. So with that, I will take any questions.
Thank you for that testimony. Any questions for this witness from the committee? Seeing none, thank you again for being here. Further witnesses to testify in support Senate Bills 1032 and 1081. Please proceed when ready.
Good morning, members of the committee. Garrett Webb, registered lobbyist for the Missouri chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. Want to thank both of the sponsors as well as Senator Gannon, who sponsored similar legislation to this, which has not been heard yet. But we think this is very important. Obviously, last year there was a significant amount of attention paid to the son of LeBron James, who had a sudden cardiac incident. Thankfully, he was treated and was able to recover, but we see these situations occurring throughout the state and throughout the country with more and more frequency, and think that it's important for schools to have in place a emergency response plan for the safety of students and staff and visitors who might be on campus.
Thank you for that testimony. Any questions for this witness from the committee? Yes, Senator, proceed.
Do we have any statistics on what the data is on these cardiac arrests over the last 5 or so years?
So I'm very fortunate on behalf of the Missouri chapter that my legislative vice chair actually specializes in pediatric cardiac care, and she has given me just some general numbers from St. Louis Children's Hospital, which I think the last time she gave me numbers, she showed that they were up like 23% over when the last time that they assessed, which was 3 years ago. Don't quote me on that number specifically, but I'll get that number back to you and confirm it.
Thank you. Do they reassess every 3 years? Is that typical?
I think she was basing that off of a study that she did as part of her fellowship. And so I'll get some more specific numbers from that team and see if I can get some others as well.
Sure, appreciate it. Thank you.
Further questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you again for being here. Further witnesses to testify in support. Please
Morning,
proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kaina Iman. On behalf of the Missouri Nurses Association, we would like to go on record in support of both of these bills and appreciate the sponsors for bringing forward any life-saving mechanisms we can put in place would be helpful. And Senator, I can check with our pediatric centers as well and see if we can get some statistics for you.
Any questions for this witness from the committee? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Further witnesses to testify in support, Senate Bill 1032 and 1081.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Otto Fajan on behalf of Missouri NEA. We'd also speak in favor. Appreciate the committee hearing these two bills. Our resolutions speak strongly in favor of our schools and our districts being very proactive in planning for emergencies. We also appreciate the opportunities for employees to have the training from qualified personnel on life-saving technologies. We think this is an important bill and happy to answer any questions.
Questions for this witness from the committee? Seeing none,
Thank
thank
you,
you
Mr.
for
Chairman.
being here. Additional witnesses to testify in support, Senate Bills 1032 and 1081.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chase Campbell, just going on record in support for BJC and Kids Win Missouri.
Appreciate that testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Next witness in support, Senate Bills 1032 and 1081.
Good morning. I'm Rebecca Gordon, the Executive Director of the Central and Northern Missouri Chapter of the American Red Cross, and we are here in support of both bills.
Thank you for being here. Any questions for this witness from the committee? Seeing none, thank you again. Additional witnesses to testify in support? Seeing none, are there any witnesses here to testify in opposition to Senate Bill 1032 and 1081? Seeing none, are there any witnesses here to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing none, that will conclude the committee hearing on 1032 and 1081. We will next hear Senate Bill 1051.
Senator, proceed when ready.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Curtis Trent, representing Senate District 20. Senate Bill 1051 is the open enrollment bill that, well, not this committee, but which committees in the Senate have heard in prior years, and which has been filed now for several years, I believe, on both sides, in both chambers of the legislature. Succinctly, the impetus of this bill, or reason why this bill is filed, is to provide more opportunities for parents and students to have an educational opportunity that best fits their needs. You know, anecdotally, and I think that this maybe even was brought up when this was discussed in the House, you have families who go to all kinds of measures right now to be able to get an education opportunity they feel is a better fit for their child, up to and including moving into a district that they think will provide that better opportunity. But of course, you know, there are many families in Missouri that are unable, for financial reasons or other life situational type reasons, unable to move their whole family, uproot their whole family and move them to another school district just to get a better educational opportunity for their child. And what this bill would do is allow them to be able to do that on a very limited basis without having to go to that extreme level of effort. And I believe that that's very important. If we want to tailor our education system to the needs of the student, the ability for the student to go to a different school setting that their parents feel is going to be better for that child, whether for whatever reason. I think we should trust parents, trust families to be able to make those decisions, and this bill would enable that, and again, in a very small and limited way. There are hard caps on the number of students that can transfer, and the circumstances around which they can transfer, the number of times which they can transfer. But my hope is that if we're able to pass this bill, we're able to see it in operation, we will recognize what many other states have recognized who have done similar measures, which is that when you empower parents to make decisions about their child's education, they are able to get better outcomes, which is not only better for that student, but better for our entire society and the future of our state. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any specific questions.
Senator Arthur?
Thanks for that explanation. You're right that an education committee in the Senate has heard open enrollment quite a few times, and that you mentioned that this bill has been filed in both chambers. Is it your intention to match the Senate version to the House version? Because there are some notable differences.
There are some differences. Right now I think it's too early to say anything like that. I think that the version that I filed is obviously the version that I prefer, and it's my hope that a version that is maximally aggressive toward empowering parents and families can be passed by this chamber. But obviously open to negotiation as we go through the process.
Okay. Well, I won't make you go through the changes, but I'll highlight some that maybe I would prefer the House version. Can you talk to me a little bit about how you envision there will be accountability? Because the whole point of these kinds of bills, what I'm hearing from the sponsors, is that they want to ensure that students receive a better tailored or more quality education, hopefully with the end goal of seeing increased student achievement, right? So how would your bill measure whether or not students who opt into open enrollment actually achieve that stated goal?
Well, we'll still have all the, and you're going to love this, I've got an accountability bill that we're going to go to after this.
Oh, I know.
So,
for that one. Yeah.
So we'll still have all the traditional measures of student achievement that the state employs to try to determine the quality outcomes of
Is there anything designed to identify students who have elected to participate in open enrollment to measure the differences of before they decided to opt into this program versus after?
Well, I mean, that will all be trackable. I mean, you'll know if a student has moved, and you will still know what that student's achievement scores were before and after the move. So I think that will be trackable with the data as we currently collect it. But the ultimate form of accountability, in my mind, is that the parents will be empowered to make a choice, and the parents will know if their student is performing better or worse.
That's kind of the opposite view of your other bill, but
well, the parents will know, but the state won't know. And so the next bill is to make sure the state knows whether or not we're performing. The parents already know, and they want the best opportunity possible for their student.
Okay.
And so I think that will provide the accountability that you're looking for.
And then so your version of the bill also opens it up to charter schools. I think there's just a technical issue with like, can you explain the funding and how that works?
Well, if there's a technical issue with how that would work, I mean, we can certainly explore that. I think ultimately what we want to get to is a mechanism where the funding follows the child from one institution to another. Like, we can have a deeper discussion on that if.
Yeah, the mechanism, I think, we'd need to change that a little bit. So the transportation fund would reimburse families who drive their children to non-resident districts. What's the solution if a parent does not have access to transportation?
Well, I mean, I'm certainly interested in exploring other ways for us to provide transportation, but I mean, this is one of the limitations of this kind of bill. Like, if you wanted to transport your child across, a distance that you simply physically are unable to do, there may be no solution to that.
All right. And then I guess just my underlying concern, and I've had discussions with Representative Pollitt about this, based on how we fund our public schools, there is quite a bit of a local effort. And so I think there is just an inherent issue that no version of open enrollment can solve, which is basically how, what do you tell a taxpayer in a district who's agreed to raise their own taxes to support their local schools and then sees someone from a different area send their kid who is unwilling to, a community that is unwilling to raise taxes to support
unwilling
their
or
schools.
unable, and it is a very troubling scenario, and I acknowledge that. But in my mind, the answer can't be, well, we just have to leave children in districts that are failing them. That can't be the answer. So whatever the answer is, we're going to have to find a way to make it work. And this is again an incredibly limited bill. And
So what happens to the children in the districts who remain that you would say are, those districts are failing them? I don't know that I would use that terminology, but what do you tell those kids who may have fewer resources as a result of your legislation?
If your concern is that the bill isn't expansive enough and doesn't cover enough children, I'm willing to expand it.
Well, I think the issue is that it will drain school districts of resources. It may lead to consolidation. And so I think you're talking about completely restructuring our public school system.
Well, fortunately, I think this bill is small enough that wouldn't occur, but like a complete restructuring would not occur. But if you believe you've identified structural problems to the fabric of the school system that basically makes it unworkable for us to provide a quality education for every child in Missouri, then perhaps a larger, more structural change is needed.
I think maybe we disagree on how we can fix it, but I appreciate your comments and explanations. Thank you.
Senator Gannon.
Hi, Senator. You mentioned failing schools in the state of Missouri. Now, excluding St. Louis City and Kansas City, how many public schools would you say, using the term failing schools, how many public schools would you say are failing in Missouri? Is it more rural? Is it more urban? I mean, I would like to know. I would like to have a list of these failing schools in the state of Missouri. And I know some are not doing as well as others. I get that. But who are the failing schools?
Well, I mean, that was a really huge caveat to exclude our two largest cities in the state in your question. But I would say that, a school can fail an individual student and not fail all the other students that are in that school. But if the school is failing for that individual student, why should they not be able to move to a better educational opportunity?
Or do you think that part of the problem might be on the student side and not necessarily the school side?
Oh, sure. I readily acknowledge that the educational outcomes are not wholly dependent on the school. But I think it's an interesting position to contend that the schools have continued to perform at a stable pace over the last 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, and the declines in educational attainment that we see are entirely cultural or economic in relation. Perhaps that's true, but I haven't seen evidence to compel that conclusion.
Well, I know this is the year of school choice.
Well, we can only hope.
Well, I don't know. But I would really, really appreciate it if you could provide me and maybe members on this committee a list of the failing schools, rural, urban, in the state of Missouri.
Okay, we'll be happy
Okay.
to provide some information.
Any other questions for the Senator? Senator Carter.
So I too is comparing Representative Pollitt's bill to your bill, and was curious at the difference in your bill where it talks about a diversity plan. Do you know what that diversity plan might look like?
Could you point me to the section that you're...
I'm sorry, Senator, I just took notes, so I'm not quite sure. We can talk about this offline a little bit, but I do have a concern about what these diversity plans look like and what the model policy supposedly is.
I think
So-
perhaps you're looking at section 1225, where basically it's authorized
Section-
exemptions, and so I think that has to do with segregation-related settlement agreements and other things that have been compelled in the past. And so there's an attempt to make sure that we're not resegregating schools accidentally through this.
So I have a line 8, number 2, diversity plan or voluntary diversity plan, a plan that is voluntarily adopted by the school.
And we may have
Is
some,
that the same
we may
language?
have some witnesses that can speak more directly to this, but I believe that's probably what you're referring to,
Okay.
is the need to comply with court orders.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Any other questions for the Senator? Senator Gannon.
Yes, please also include on that list failing charter schools.
Failing...
Charter
Oh,
schools.
yes, of course.
Is there anyone here to testify in support of Senate Bill 1051? Please come forward. Make sure you fill out your witness form.
Kate Casas, registered lobbyist here on behalf of the American Federation for Children. Just want to go on record in support of the legislation. We think all kids deserve a high quality education that works for them.
Any questions for this witness, Senator Carter?
Are there any roadblocks that you see that are in place right now that are keeping kids from having a quality education?
Certainly for the kids that don't have access to school choice unless their parents can afford it, if the school they're in is not working for them academically or otherwise, that's a roadblock. If they can't afford a different option, yeah.
I appreciate it.
Any other questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else here in support?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. Tricia Workman here today on behalf of the Missouri Charter Public School Association. Just specifically in this bill, as it's been mentioned by Senator Arthur and others, the House bill allows charter school students to leave, but doesn't allow charter school students to accept students from other districts, and this bill would resolve that, and so we do appreciate that. We don't feel any child should be stuck in a school district or a school that they don't want to be in, so appreciate any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else in support?
Good morning. Dean Johnson with Quality Schools Coalition. Our organization advocates for policy environment in Missouri that will support all of our public schools to flourish. We support Senator Trent's open enrollment bill. We know that the local Traditional public school is going to be the right choice for many families, but not the right choice for every single family. And we want to ensure that all of our students in Missouri have an option to choose the best school for their child. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Further testimony and support?
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Becky Lohman, registered lobbyist for Yes Every Kid and Missouri Century Foundation. Just want to go on record in support. Thank the chair and the House sponsor for bringing this bill forward.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you. Further testimony and support? Testimony in opposition?
I'm Kyle Cruz, I'm superintendent of the St. Clair R13 School District. Best to send
Any questions for this witness? Senator Carter.
Do you see your ability to compete with the other schools with all of those programs that you say that you're doing well in? Do you see a draw to your school? would you support some kind of language that makes it to where the parents have to match those dollars if they're taking their kid from your district to another district? And then one more question, if you don't mind. In the bill, it refers to, regardless of whether or not a non-resident district participates in the public school open enrollment, you need to adopt a model policy. Do you have any apprehension to adopting an open enrollment policy, whether or not you participate? Appreciate it. Thank you.
Senator Thompson Rader.
Good morning. Thank you for coming up. Okay, a couple of questions. So with this bill, you have to opt in, so you guys wouldn't have to participate, and it's capped at 5% a year. And it's my understanding that that's kind of really in the neighborhood of how many move in and out each year on just a typical basis, not school choice. Can you speak to either of those? I mean, are your concerns only if you were to opt in, so you could just not opt in, or?
I can speak to those concerns. I think that the idea that you have to opt in order to have students meet is incorrect. If I read the bill correctly, opting in only means you accept students from other districts. There's no provision that prevents students from meeting the same parents. So students could leave regardless of their action. As far as the percent of students that come and go, the fact is geographically, some districts like ours are not all the way to work, and they're not close to Target and Starbucks. And so that's a geographic and economic disadvantage that districts like St. Clair and Homedale and Hathaway and Hurley and Cosmo all face. This would be, I think, a bill that leads to school consolidation.
Okay, and I'll confirm that on the opting in with the sponsor on the way we're both reading that. Then just, do you guys have a smaller class size?
Yes, class sizes that are about equivalent to the district in our area. It's between 14 and 21, depending on what grade level it's in.
Okay, because I was just going to say, just as a aside, I have 3 kids, and they all went through Saxon. I'm from Saxon, and wonderful school, lots of great academic football program, volleyball, all the things. And my oldest and my youngest did a great job academically and loved it. But my middle son is dyslexic like me, and I would have done anything to be able to afford to take him to Kelly's school, which is out in the country. I would have happily driven him there just for him to have a school experience that he could keep up in, and that he could, get the things that he needed, which was a smaller classroom, not so much focus on all the on all the extras, but that would. So I think that a lot of the fear that kids are just going to go to the football programs or who's got the best weight room, I think we miss out on. Some of us parents need a place that our kids that are just kind of falling in the cracks can be seen.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. I'm getting text messages that your microphone isn't on or you're not speaking into the microphone. Can you make sure the little green light's on and that you're speaking right into it, please?
Okay.
There you go. Thank you. People who are listening at home weren't getting your answers.
I could do it again if you'd like.
No, sir. Thank you.
No, I understand and I
appreciate you
sympathize
coming.
entirely. And if there's a way to put together something that allows parents with special situations, rather than breaking apart the whole system, I think that's something we should probably talk about.
Okay, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Beck.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
So a couple questions I have for you, and I have a lot of concerns with this bill. I I think the concept would be different if we were looking at the same funding across the board, if we were looking at everybody getting that same equitable funding as it goes along. But if you look at schools that are in my district compared to schools that are outstate, and there's this change, you also see, I think, a draw from a lot of the richer schools that maybe don't have kids anymore, and to fill their football teams and to actually have a football team so they don't have to partner with another school district. I've heard these things being said in my areas. The question I have for you is, and it's kind of like it's a statement and I believe fact here. We've seen the actual attack on our neighborhood schools for quite a while in Missouri. We've seen it start in our two biggest areas. We've seen that happen with the charters coming in and the attack on schools and the communities. No longer your kid gets to go down the street and go to their school. That those schools have closed. They shift around. This here, I think, would present that, not maybe in its current form, but once you get involved in this, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and it will be expanded. This would take away your neighborhood schools, which I think is the fabric of your community, and you tell me about it, what your school means to your community.
Absolutely. The fact of the matter is, if you go to one of our school buildings, pretty much any day or any evening or any weekend, you'll see the buildings with people in them. I took my father-in-law, who's a mechanical engineer, out to our building project where we're actually building a performing arts center on Saturday, and our high school parking lots were full. We had a wrestling thing going on. We had a junior dogs basketball thing going on. The school is a center of the community as well as the largest employer. And something that may get overlooked here is when school consolidation happens, all those kids who get to play ball or be in the FFA or be the president of the FBLA in all of these small districts, the ones with 500 kids or 700 kids or 800 kids, when those schools are no longer viable, whether they're smaller and have fewer resources or even close altogether, there are multitudes of students who won't make the team at the bigger school, and they won't be an officer in the FFA. I actually grew up in a school district that had 500 kids total, and I was a state FFA officer, and I just went by and saw a bunch of state FFA officers walking to the Capitol this morning. What an experience. But I wouldn't have had that in a school of 1,500 or 2,000 or 2,500 because we couldn't all be officers in those areas.
No, I mean, that's a good point. And, you know, I was on a school board for 9 years, and I come from a county that has 1 million people in it. However, we have areas, and 3 of them right around me, that are smaller school districts that have their own identity. And they're actually, since they're not towns or cities within the county, they're kind of like the governance there too. And I see this in small towns when I go out there on a Friday night of football. The entire town is closed down. They're all at the field. Those things are going to go away with these kind of efforts as we go forward. This is what happens, and we've seen that happen in our bigger cities. And I think that is part of breaking down the community fabric. That is where you see these issues that are coming up. You know, I wish we were addressing all the other issues that you possibly have in your school, whether it's you know, free and reduced lunch or child aftercare, before and after care, all these other things we could be doing to have kids become successful, instead of saying that they need to go to another school district, or their parents can drive them to the city wherever they're living and go to another wealthy school district. I think that's not the way to go about this. We've seen this during desegregation. It didn't really work. But anyway, thank you for your comments here, and it's kind of...
I appreciate your sentiment. Thank you, sir.
It's going to shape me on this bill,
thank you.
Thank you.
I think I have a couple follow-up questions for you. I just wanted to clarify, your testimony earlier seemed to be that you thought parental convenience was an inappropriate use of open enrollment, but then later seemed to clarify that you were fine helping make secondary arrangements for parents that were better for their family. Which is it? Are you comfortable with the legislature trying to find a path for parents to be able to have more flexibility, or are you unsupportive of that?
I don't think I presented it as an either or, so let me clarify a bit.
Do you have a process in place right now for a parent to petition your school district to allow them to transfer to a different school? Maybe that's a better way of asking that.
Actually, let me go back to the sponsor of the similar bill in the House.
Yeah, but I appreciate that, but that bill's not before the chamber here or this body. So just, do you have a process in place right now for that, or
if
no?
a student wants to transfer and you go to a certain program, a certain hour, a certain class in a neighboring district, there is not currently a process for that.
What about just wholesale
Should
transfer
there
into a
be-
different district?
Should there be a
not
way
for a
for a student
specific
to go next
program.
door and go to their engineering program for a couple hours a day?
That's
I don't
not
think that's something I could oppose.
But what about a just broader transfer? If there's maybe a teacher who works in a different school district wanting to take their kid with them to school, is that something you would support or
That's part
oppose?
of the board policy, yes, that's approved.
Okay, you mentioned earlier that your teacher pay is some of the lowest in the state. Is your administrator pay also some of the lowest in the state?
Yes.
And what
Among districts our size, I have the most experience by about 17 years, and I have intentionally kept my salary below any other administrator or district our size.
Can you walk through what portion of the budget is allotted to teacher pay? I think something that's frustrating to everybody who's involved in education is our teachers aren't getting paid enough. And one of the things that we've seen is additional requirements for administrators, more and more hiring on that side, as well as increasing budgets. When you look at the trend lines, is that something that you're experiencing?
Are you asking if administrator pay is going up and taking up more and more of the budget? No, not in St. Clair.
Okay. I'd love to see some follow-up on just what portion of that. I guess it's public record. My office could probably find it from Desi. Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Anyone else here in opposition? While this witness is coming forward, can I just get a show of hands? We've got a couple more bills to present and about an hour to do it to see how much time we have. Who's here in opposition? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Who's here for informational purposes? Nobody. Okay, so I'm not going to limit everybody, but if you could just kind of limit yourself. Like I said, there's 2 other bills that need to be presented still, and I'd like to make sure that there's enough time to get to those. Thank you. Please go ahead.
I will try to be quick. Good morning to the committee, and thank you for your time and consideration given here. My name is Derek Lark, and I serve as the superintendent of the Santa Fe R10 school district located in Lafayette and Saline counties. I stand opposed to this legislation. The Santa Fe School District is a small rural school surrounded by several larger districts, to include Marshall, Carrollton, and Higginsville, to name a few. We are a consolidation of the cities of townships of Waverly, Alma, Blackburn, and Grand Pass, all of which used to have schools of their own. Santa Fe is a high-performing school district. We scored in the top 5% on the 2023 annual performance report for all K-12 public schools. We have a 100% graduation rate for many years running. We average 95% attendance. Our students always do well in placement after graduation, which is very, very important. Our extracurricular teams have won multiple state championships, and our walls are covered with banners and things that our community is proud of. I credit this success to a hardworking staff as well as having a supportive community who truly wraps their arms around the school, the staff, and especially the kids. Some would say that Santa Fe would benefit from open enrollment because of these successes. My board, my staff, and the community members that I have spoken with, however, would disagree. Public education functions best as a service to the community in which it lies, with both sides codependent on the other to be successful. When you have non-resident students coming in and out of a district, that mutualism is lost. Staff worry about losing the true educational and emotional value gained by having familiarity with a student and knowing their past as well as that of their families. If families do not live in the community that their students attend school, they have less reason or even means by proximity to truly be engaged. Despite the quality of our district, students may still be lost for a myriad of reasons. As we all know, the above-mentioned success can quickly change for various reasons. Possibly a parent who's upset because of a discipline matter. We try to run a pretty tight ship in the district. In our case, it might be to go play 11-man football in one of the area districts rather than 8-man football. We often hear that 8-man isn't real football, and it would only take a handful of kids, a group of kids, to go to a neighboring district, and we lose that program, which would be unfortunate for the kids that would stay. The reasons could be many. If we were to have a 5-year downturn and lose 5% a year for the first 2 years, and an uncertain number more when the cap is taken away after those first 2 years, we would lose over 50 students and quickly be in a situation where programming and/or staff would need to be cut. We are already one of the lower paying districts in the area, and if we had to further withhold salaries, retaining and attracting staff would become even more difficult. Student opportunity is often cited as a reason to tout open enrollment. While Santa Fe cannot offer every program that some of our larger neighboring districts can, we do offer dual credit and AP classes with both the University of Central Missouri and Missouri Valley College, and participation in Career Tech Ed classes at any neighboring area career center. While Carrollton is our consortium career center, I will pay tuition for a student to attend classes at any area career center that they feel would benefit their future, they or their parents feel would benefit their future. At a more personal level, I have seen my own 3 daughters flourish in this small rural setting. They have been provided opportunities they would not have had otherwise, and I made the decision to move to this community for those reasons. 2 are now graduated, 1 pursuing physical therapy and the other nursing. There may have been a fine art that they didn't have the opportunity to enroll in, but the quality and integrity of education they received was worth much more than that. And this is indicative of a vast majority of the rural school systems in Missouri. This, honestly, in my opinion, is one of the most important things this committee needs to consider. Do we value quality rural public education?
Thank you so much for your
Excuse me?
I'm sorry, I thought you were finished, please.
Just about. Thank you. I have seen open enrollment tear through my home state of Iowa, serving the few from year to year until the sorting is done, and you have your ultra-successful and dominant schools and the ones that simply are not. Those children with parents who have the means and interest to move their child for whatever reason do so, while those who cannot simply don't. The evolution is inevitable from a district that is salvageable with community involvement and support to the slow degradation year after year leading to the resegregation of public education. Now in Iowa, as you may well know, universal open enrollment is the reality, and it didn't take very long. With public education funding going to private schools that do not have the same rules and mandates that public schools have, nor do they have to educate all, only those that they choose to. It is an uneven playing field, to say the least. This is unbelievable to me. My own father works at a private school.
Sir, I don't believe that that's involved in this bill. Is that correct? Is there language that's authorizing private school vouchers in this bill?
But it has evolved to that in Iowa very quickly.
I get it. We have 7 other people who are wanting to testify, and they've traveled far to be able to do so. And I know the senators probably are going to have some questions for you, and I want to make sure we've got time for them.
Certainly, yep.
Do you want to go ahead and wrap up?
Yep, absolutely. My own father works at a private school in Iowa and told me they are planning a $48 to $60 million facility, mostly centered around athletics, which is quite unfortunate. We would like to think that these changes would lead to competition in areas that would benefit schools, and I'm not sure that that would be the case. To answer to a couple pointed questions, I think when you talk about the diversity plans that were discussed earlier, the Quad Cities in Davenport, Iowa would be a good example to look at. But I will hold here and take any questions.
Senator Beck.
Thank you. And you can continue on with what you were going to present earlier, because I think it's important that we're not only talking about this bill, but we're talking about a larger movement that's going to move us in a direction. I mean, the senator himself just said he wanted to see the funding follow the child and all these other things. So these are big movements. So that's what they want to do eventually. So feel free, tell us what's happened in Iowa since the time. You know, Iowa used to be the bastion of what everybody looked at for education. I remember the Iowa test way back when I used to take them. But now it's not the same.
Certainly, yes. It quickly evolved into a system where now that you have universal open enrollment, which sends these dollars, $7,000, I believe, in Iowa to any school, charter, private, whatever that they may want to. We need to be wary that could quickly happen here. Not saying we don't have a glass ball, but we can look at other states for examples.
And what does that do to your community and your neighborhoods when that happens? When the kids leave or to think the grass is greener, or possibly, it could be or maybe not either. We don't know that either. There's no accountability to a lot of this stuff. But
Well, and unfortunately, we're in a smaller school, and the smaller the district is, the more of an effect that a movement of even just a few kids can have on programming. Larger districts can absorb that easier just because of numbers, but it's more difficult to absorb even losing a handful, say 5 kids from a class.
Yeah,
and one of
the big arguments I hear about this is the 8-man football to 11-man football from a lot of the House colleagues. Like, well, we can have 11-man football and we can do this and we can do that. If that's what we're basing a lot of these bills on, I think we're in super trouble in this state. If we're not looking at what educational outcomes and what we can do to help your district succeed, help your community to succeed.
Yeah, we have a quality school and a quality program for our kids. It would be very unfortunate if that fabric, and Santa Fe School District is the fabric of the communities that I mentioned earlier. And it would be very unfortunate if those communities, those isolated communities, would lose their school or programming within that school because of this legislation.
And I feel the same way in my area. I have a couple of smaller districts surrounded by bigger districts that have even more capacity for different things to happen. But we also want to try to keep our neighborhoods together and our communities in that way. So thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition. I'm going to go ahead and start a timer because, like I said, we've got 2 other bills to present. We have 6 more people. If I split up half an hour by 6, that's 5 for the kids listening. So everybody's going to get 5 minutes, questioning 2, and then we'll wrap up.
Hi, I'm Tammy Henderson. I'm the Executive Director of Community Relations for the North Kansas City School District, and I'll be very quick. One of the things I would like to clear up is although Kansas City Public Schools has had issues in the past in Kansas City, that is only one school district in the city. My school district, North Kansas City Schools, is the largest school district within the city limits of Kansas City, Missouri, at 21,500 students. One of the things that we have done, we are also, let me add, the 2nd largest school district in the state of Missouri. Listening to the rural superintendents, we have a little bit of a similar story in our school district in the fact that we have straight feeder patterns. So when you start school as a kindergartner, you go to school all the way through with your other classmates. One of the things that open enrollment, we are busting at the seams. We have had an additional 100 to 150 kids come to our schools for the last 10 years. Our demographer anticipates that this will continue for another 15 years. We would not be able to accept new students. And we understand that right now the bill is opt-in when it comes to accepting students, but things have a way of changing down here, and then we are worried about future mandates that would require us to do that, and we just simply don't have the room. We are building new schools. We have passed our last several bond and levy campaigns by 80%. Our parents are very, very supportive of our school districts. I'm a product of our school district, and I've raised my kids in our school district. I think that one of the things that I've always been interested in when it comes to open enrollment is statistics showing the improvement of student performance in those areas where kids have moved in. I am not aware of anything that demonstrates that at this point. So that's something I think that this committee should consider. The other thing is, as Senator Beck stated, how important neighborhood schools are. Our district is built on neighborhood schools. We believe in neighborhood schools. We believe strong schools create strong communities, and vice versa. So we want to serve to unify our community. We ask that the state legislature stand by us in these commitments and oppose this bill. It takes away the local control of our elected school board. These folks run into their patrons in grocery stores, at church, and we feel like our local school board is best to determine when or where we should do programs like this. We do have the ability within our school district, if a parent finds themselves in a situation that they can move to a different school within our school district. So that does offer parents a little bit of a change, but we are very judicious on doing that. We don't do it for sports reasons. We probably have done it the most for special education needs. So we, again, are a 21,500 student school district, pre-K through K in Kansas City, Missouri, and we would like to keep it that way.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, if the next witness in opposition would please come forward.
Good morning. My name is Jerry Hockman, former teacher, principal, and superintendent in St. Louis. And I want to note that during that time I was president of the Voluntary Interdistrict Coordinating Council and was in the district at the time when over 13,000 students from the city had the opportunity to enroll other places, and can tell you the effects of that. Some positive on the education for the kids, but also what happened to the neighborhoods and to the schools. I've also experienced open enrollment. I was a superintendent of 3 districts simultaneously, not consolidated, simultaneously in Massachusetts, and also then in New York. And I know the magnitude of the operational aspects of this and what it takes to make this work, if it works, and it doesn't everywhere. My remarks fall in the informational category quickly, and the simple part of that is to please step back and see the big picture. You're going to hear a lot of specifics.
I'm so sorry. I just wanted to clarify. You're testifying for informational purposes, not in opposition?
No, I
okay.
saying that I have.
Sorry, those are magic words, and I perked up worried that I had
figured I'd
it
get more
classified in the wrong spot. Go ahead.
I'm staying in the I oppose category.
Thanks.
But step back and see the big picture. See the entire state, not just what's happening here in different places. Do what echoes what you, some of you perhaps, and others have said in the chamber and the House last week. Address the things that need to be addressed first, and maybe that'll keep kids in the districts and improve the districts that you say folks are trying to leave. All of the bills that have been proposed in any area of education should be intended to improve the education and opportunities, access to resource for every child in the state, not just some. Then do that first. Do that instead of turning the schools inside out to accommodate factions, interests that are not in everyone's best interests, and political interests. Don't punish the districts who can lose students, as you've heard. Don't take away their identity, their pride, and community support. Taking millions of dollars away from schools that will still have to function, allow a small number of students to leave, only exacerbates the real problems that you're trying to solve. This law with vague language is ripe for litigation, and that just adds to your problems. Writing a law that could be discriminatory in selecting students based on their individual needs and interests, but not all students not having the opportunity, again, adds to your problems. And using legislation as a smokescreen solution to get what a small group of people want for reasons other than providing equitable access for quality education for every student is not professional or responsible. I'll skip the part about competition. I apologize. Do the things that need to be done for all students in all schools first, and things that might help the schools that you're saying parents are wanting to leave. Focus on raising teacher salaries. Address teacher and administrator retention and recruiting. Address professional teachers and administrators with pride, development, and respect. Understand that and fixing accountability, accreditation, and assessment, a topic coming up today, is one that needs to be addressed for sure. Eliminating the impediments, for example, that might cause districts to have a 4-day week, which has come up often, is simple. Fund the districts that have those so that they can get back to where they want to be instead of attracting kids away from them. Provide funding for specialized programs and services in and around the schools where they are now. Implement efficiency measures in the school district and the state. Use technology, the calendar, business and educational partners, and other means to provide access to the rigorous curriculum that we talk about. All of these are being addressed in other bills, which would eliminate the need to try to say people want to leave their districts. I'll conclude there only by saying that I hope you will step back and see the big picture.
Senator Rowden has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you for being here today. Would you remind me who you're with? I missed that. I'm sorry.
I'm a retired teacher, principal, and superintendent.
Okay, awesome. So you listed a nice laundry list of many things I agree with, of things that this legislature could be doing to partner with traditional public schools. And like I said, I agree with a lot of that. My question for you is, if we do all that, would you be willing to support some of the other things that we're interested in doing, i.e. open enrollment or an expansion of our ESA program? If we were to do, my question is, what do we have to do, what boxes do we have to check to sufficiently say that this legislature supports public education to the point that we could then say maybe other options are needed? When does that happen?
I believe there are other ways to address that specific need, not the political interest in choice, not just because it's a hot item right now like vouchers and everything else that you've heard about. If that's the goal, no, I wouldn't support 1 ounce of it. I'm sorry.
Even if we do all the things that you mentioned?
If the reason for implementing choice is to implement choice, that does nothing for children. That's not a goal. The goal should be educating every child equitably and providing the resources for them. And there are ways to meet some of those individual needs that you are saying children want and the parents want to choose from. There's a way to accommodate that without having kids moving all over the state. Places that have done it, and there are some that have done it successfully, started 20 years ago, way before all the political noise, way before this was a hot item. It was because of the logistics of their state, and they phased it in a way and built a system that worked. That's wonderful. I don't see that happening overnight. I don't see that happening in 10 years here, nor do I see that that's the goal of what the legislature should be. It should be equitable access to resources for children across the board, with the best teachers that you can find who are working hard now.
I agree with
the
that.
hardest that they possibly can.
I agree with that.
Principals that are doing everything they can to make these schools successful, so the competition argument makes no sense. So the short answer to your question is, no, I would not support choice for the sake of choice. And I've worked in places that have it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition.
Good morning, Madam Chair and the committee. My name is David Lee Brush, and I'm with the Missouri Equity Education Partnership Action. Really quickly, we stand firmly against any program that is going to move public dollars away from public schools. Whether it is through school choice, whether it is through vouchers, we believe that public taxpayer dollars should go strictly to public schools. And while this is a public-to-public bill, this does allow money to go to charters, and it does not specify that it's public charters. It doesn't give any specification. I echo everybody's comments that rural schools, therefore rural communities, will suffer. I taught in a rural community, and I just keep thinking about Caledonia and Bismarck and thinking about what's going to happen to those districts if this happens. There's one thing to choose consolidation. This is going to force consolidation upon districts that do not want it and take away local control. Competition is a great model if everything is equal, but in a service paradigm, which is public schools are services, competition is not the best model because the playing field is not equitable because of how we fund our schools in Missouri. It's based on your location, it's based on your tax base, and that's, as long as we're funding schools through property taxes, then this is not going to be equitable. I'm in favor of a sales tax, even though it'll skyrocket, but it'll even the playing field for everybody to fund public schools. Finally, I'm a data person, and I have been tracking the data on this issue in both houses of the legislature for the last few years. There is overwhelming opposition to this concept, not just this bill, but the concept of open enrollment. Look here today, how many people are in opposition? The House had how many in opposition? The mirror bill in the House had bipartisan opposition in that chamber, and it's not getting better. And so instead of just letting the words wash over you here, I would beg you to please listen to the people. And so for those reasons, because this is not going to provide equity for students in Missouri, Missouri Equity Education Partnership Action stands opposed to this bill. Thank you so much. And I'm also testifying as an individual to save time.
Thank you so much. Any questions for this witness? Senator Carter.
So to go back to my prior question, if there was a way that we could find funding that was equitable across open enrollment, public education, where those tax dollars followed or the parent paid the extra, would that alleviate some of the concern?
Well, I think that that's going to decrease. That's going to just increase inequity, because where are some of the parents going to find those matching funds? I mean, you're talking about now really creating an equity gap, because that would mean that parents that have means would be able to do this, and people who don't have means would not be able to do it. So that would make it worse.
So essentially you're saying we would be right back where we are?
No, I'm saying that we need to start funding our public school, our neighborhood schools, and follow the model that has been in place where, you know, we have compulsory education in the United States, and it is for compulsory, and it's public education. Missouri has a constitutional imperative to fund public education. It's public education. So if you can find ways to beef up public education, great, but we will always stand opposed to any public dollars going to any non-public schools. Full stop.
We'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
Senator Rowden.
I just want to clarify one thing. You said non-public money going to non-public schools. Is there such a thing as a private charter school in the state of Missouri?
Not yet, but the door is opening, and this is one of the places where there's a foot in the door, and it expands and expands and expands. So there isn't yet, but we have to kind of look towards the future. I'm not testifying just for today. I'm testifying for tomorrow and the years to come in Missouri, because I see where it's going and where it's gone in other states.
Is there such a thing as a private charter school in any state?
There are some third-party entities that run charter schools in some states, I believe. Yes.
Are those private schools, or are they public schools?
Well, they're kind of a hybrid in between, because they're run by a non-elected board, and they're run sometimes by private entities. So I'm not exactly sure how to qualify charter schools. I will be really, as a human being and as an individual, I am not a fan of charter schools.
I get that, and I just
Yeah.
wanted to clarify in this
Right.
particular bill.
Yeah, in this
Certainly by definition in Missouri, and I think by definition nationally, there would be no public money going to private schools in this bill if this bill were to
Right,
become law.
but again-
That's just clarifying.
Right, and but I think that this, to your point, I think that this bill is also a foot in the door to expand it into private schools, into full-on vouchers like Iowa has, which I think is going to be disastrous.
Thank you so much for your testimony.
Thank you so
Anyone
much.
here in opposition, please come forward.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Out of Fajan here again, this time speaking on Senate Bill 1051. We would speak in opposition to Senate Bill 1051. The green light is on. So about 3.5 years ago, Representative Pollitt approached me and said, I want to do an open enrollment bill in the state of Missouri. And I said, well, you sure like to take on difficult tasks, because if you look around the country, most states that have open enrollment, or at least have had it for a long period of time, tend to be states that rely mostly on state funding. Missouri relies 100% on the local school district to provide facilities. And if you look at the average, it's about 60% local funding for operations year to year. We also, our resolution says that we think that open enrollment in the public school setting can harm students if you don't have essential criteria in place as far as how you implement it, how you establish it, and how you monitor how it's operating. That was based upon seeing some states around the country that have done it, in our opinion, without those essential criteria, and it's been a problem. And so our opposition to Senate Bill 1051 is primarily because it really falls short in terms of those sorts of essential criteria. One of those that I think is maybe most concerning to us, and it contrasts with the House bill really speaks to making sure that we are carefully monitoring and reporting on and analyzing the impact of this bill over time. Because if you look at many other states, they have, for example, Minnesota, the ground zero for first state to do charter schools, first state to do statewide open enrollment. They have completely resegregated the Twin Cities area into essentially African American concentrated schools, Lutheran or white concentrated schools, and Hispanic concentrated schools. So it really works against the fundamental purpose under the Missouri Constitution of what education is for, which is to preserve the rights and liberties of the people, which is at its core that maintaining our support for the capacity for democracy and maintaining governance. And a part of that is the connection that folks feel to everyone else in their community, not just people who look and think exactly like them. And so it should be of concern, and Missouri also has the most expensive track record in terms of segregation and federal court involvement of any state in the nation, with cases in both Kansas City and St. Louis. We would caution against doing an open enrollment bill that lacks the essential monitoring and the essential criteria to avoid or to be cognizant of and to react if we see resegregation happening. But there's still a considerable list of features that really don't make this equitable for all students. One of those, probably at the top of the list, has to be that you are allowed to deny an application based upon an IEP. But there are several others. The timelines are different and they're too early. Kids usually are making decisions about enrollment right around February 1st. This requires that decision to be done at December 1st. One of the most profound lacks is the lack of offering of transportation. The House bill does that. This bill does not. There's actually a long list of problems with importing charter schools into this legislation. That appears to have just been done by putting in the word charter school, but there are a lot of policies, and there's the finance provisions, there's the lotteries they already use, there's the review panel and how those decisions are being made. Very problematic to just import charter schools into this bill without thinking through all of those policies. There are several other items that are lacking in this bill. For those reasons, we are strongly opposed and would urge the committee to vote against it.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Next, in opposition, please come forward.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Brant Shields, and I'm here for the Missouri School Boards Association. Don't want to retrod ground or replow land that's already been plowed, so really want to focus on something that Senator Arthur mentioned early on today. And a particular flaw with this version of the bill is the charter school provision that allows open enrollment into charter schools. So a feature, if you can use that word, about this particular bill and other open enrollment bills that have come before this body in the House is that open enrollment is a voluntary decision made by a locally elected school board to opt in to whether or not they want to accept students from other districts. That locally elected school board is accountable to the local taxpayers every April when they come up for a vote. And by that same token, if the taxpayers of a district think it is a poor use of their local tax funds to bring in students from an outside district, they can vote to change the school board and change whether or not they want to participate in open enrollment. As we know, that's just not how charter schools are set up in this state. Charter schools do not have locally elected boards of education. And so what you end up with is that a charter school could decide to participate in open enrollment and take students from an outside district, and without the taxpayers' consent, without the local board of elections, school board's consent, really kind of leech or siphon the local taxpayer funds to the charter school to pay for students that are not underneath the jurisdiction necessarily of those local elected taxpayers. So that's
I'm sorry, I just want to interrupt. Do you think that educating children is leeching?
No. I'm saying that the local taxpayer funds that are voted on when people vote for bonds and levies for their particular district, it is that the accountability that's provided for those taxpayers is through the locally elected Board of Education.
Are there any other questions for this witness?
I do. Thank you. So if say we leave the charters in this, if the charters were left in this bill and this bill somehow gets through both chambers and becomes, would you be open to maybe we change the way the charters are set up? Maybe if they had a locally elected board and then they also reported to DESE instead of another separate entity that has no accountability, would that be something that would be feasible if we did that in this bill in order to have this open enrollment work?
Sure. Well, of course, I represent the locally elected boards of education, so we are always going to be of the agreement that more locally elected boards who oversee those taxpayer funds to oversee our most precious resource in the state, which is Missouri's students.
Right.
We're always going to be in favor of that locally elected
And currently,
option.
a lot of these boards and the charters don't even come from the communities. We don't, I think we made a law to make sure that they have to be in the state, but that's it. They don't even, a lot of them don't even come from the actual community that they represent. Is that correct?
Yeah, I can't speak to any particular board, but yes, there is no requirement that they live
But
inside the community
But if it was apples to apples, that'd be something we could have a conversation, because you brought up some good points there. Also, we have the ability, charter schools close sometimes, and then what do we do with those funds that are gone? Those taxpayer funds.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always happy to have those conversations, Senator.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition, please come forward.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Matt Michelson with the Missouri State Teachers Association, go on record in opposition to the bill. I won't rehash a lot of what you've already heard. We do have concerns about consolidation happening across the state. This program gets implemented. We also have concerns about the $60 million price tag. We know that teacher recruitment and retention has been in everyone's mind. We think that that $60 million going towards teacher salaries would really benefit students in the classroom instead of paying for duplicative services. Also, the other thing I think we're concerned about, as districts try to recruit students into their districts, we believe that that will be an administrative function, and so you will see districts continue to have that administrative bloat as they try to recruit more and more students from neighboring districts. So that's certainly a concern that we have. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, next witness in opposition, please come forward.
Good morning. Lisa Panett with Armor Vine. We have concerns about what children we may be funding. There's nothing in this bill that says that the taxpayer might not be on the hook for illegals. As it stands right now, the public schools are required to take illegals. There's a huge difference, though, because the public school doesn't have an incentive to do that, where those that could profit off of charters and private schools have a monetary incentive to flood the state with illegals, and that would be on the taxpayer dime. The second problem that we have is with the model policy in the non-participating schools that's created by DESE. We have no idea what's going to be in that model policy. Last year, it stated in the bill that DEI was going to be part of the policy. So as the body moves forward and they're against DEI, now this model policy created by DESE, who has been part of the problem all along, DESE's been part of the problem, that now they're able to write model policy even for those that don't want to participate that can include DEI. So these are just some of our major problems with the bill.
Thank you for your testimony. Are there any questions for this witness? Senator Thompson-Rader.
Just to clarify, so you're saying that last year's bill had
Diversity, equity, and inclusion in it, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Senator Rowden.
Yeah, one more clarification. The first part of it, you basically were saying that receiving schools would potentially take non-citizens for profit purposes?
Yeah. I mean, there would be nothing prohibiting them from doing so unless you add it into the bill.
Have we seen that happen in other places? Obviously, open enrollment and choice type things have happened in other states.
Right now, the governor is going to the border right now, and now we see an incoming problem where he's even wanting to protect the state in some ways.
Sure.
He's also saying that we have a worker shortage. So who could fill the gap of a worker shortage? Illegal aliens. So I think we have to look at these things and we have to stop the gaps that I mean, that were unintended consequences, because I think we have a lot of those.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition, please come forward. Are there any witnesses here for informational purposes only? Seeing none, that concludes our hearing on Senate Bill 1051. Senator Trent, if you'd like to come forward and present Senate Bill 1366.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Again, Curtis Trent, representing District 20. This is the Quality Education Act, which has previously been heard this year. So I will be brief in my explanation. Essentially, this bill requires a performance metric of student growth, and it be added to the current accountability criteria. Requires the department to prepare a school accountability report that's clear and easily accessible to the parent, and a report card for each school district and charter. School performance at the elementary level is 50% school growth, 50% overall student performance in statewide assessments. And then for high school, the metric is 60% college and career readiness and 40% end-of-course exams and high school graduation rates. The goal here is simply to provide a metric for accountability for school districts that is stable, that will create, over time, will create a body of data that we can compare and hopefully will help inform a lot of discussions that we have around education in the state. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions for the senator? Seeing none, can I have a show of hands, please? If you're here to testify in support of Senate Bill 1366, raise your hand. And if you're here to testify in opposition, please raise your hand. Okay, great. We're going to give about 3 minutes per person, so that way we can get through this bill and move on to the next. The first witness in support, please come forward.
Good morning. Dean Johnson with Quality Schools Coalition. We support the Quality Education Act because it places emphasis on academic growth, which is the truest measure of a school's positive impact in the lives of its students. Also, the Quality Education Act directs the Department of Elementary and Secondary Schools to create a report card, a school report card that provides clear and accessible information about school performance. Now, this is a much needed improvement. On a regular basis, we hear from frustrated parents trying to find and understand information about school performance from DESE or any other reliable source. Here are a few of the elements of the bill that we most appreciate. It measures what matters, so academic growth will account for 50% of an elementary school's APR, or annual performance report. Currently that's just 24%. Academic growth combined with college and career readiness will account for 60% of a high school's APR, and currently that's just 34%. School performance will no longer be based on DESE's prescribed paperwork and compliance measures. We do believe that DESE can provide great value to schools by recommending best practices in curriculum, instructional practices, professional development, and other areas critical to creating educational excellence. However, we believe that school leaders should have greater autonomy to create the learning environment that is best suited for their community, while also being held accountable to rigorous and measurable academic expectations. I do want to address one critique that I've heard comparing the Quality Education Act to No Child Left Behind, federal legislation from the early 2000s. No Child Left Behind was based entirely on student achievement levels with no consideration for academic growth. But we know that students begin school at all different academic levels, so to measure school impact, we must focus on growth. That's what No Child Left Behind got wrong, and the Quality Education Act gets right. There is broad agreement that Missouri's current method of evaluating school quality is not working. We know Missouri is losing ground academically to other states. We see school administrators and teachers spending too much time on paperwork, taking their attention away from student learning, and we hear from parents who cannot find the information they need to make good choices for their children. Quality Education Act measures what matters: student growth, achievement, college and career readiness. It gives parents valuable information about school performance, and it allows educators to focus on kids. So I want to thank you all for hearing this bill and urge you to support it.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Beck.
Yes, thank you. I know we've discussed this bill, and you've been in my office, and we've had some conversations, and in general, I'm okay with the growth type model and what we do, and I've served on a school board for 9 years, so I see the things, what you're saying. But you made a comment that I don't understand, quite frankly. You said this would help make local schools more autonomous. How would that happen when it's actually giving DESE more power? You're taking a test, you're moving it up to 50%. You're going, originally this bill last year, if I recall, had, because I think there was going to be some outcomes from it, that you're going to have schools that'll fail. And originally this bill had a component in it that the bottom 10 and the bottom 20% would automatically become unaccredited, and then we move forward. Correct me if I'm wrong. That was in this bill last year. Is that?
Yeah, it was something similar to that. Just upon more conversations with legislators and other groups kind of working in the education arena, we, in 2019, you'll probably recall the School Turnaround Act passed. We believe—
I voted for it. I thought it was a great bill.
Yep, we agree. We think it provides a really good framework for supporting struggling schools. We've observed that it hasn't been funded or adequately funded. We would support good, adequate funding to fully implement the School Turnaround Act. And so for that reason, we recommended to Senator Trent and Representative Hafner to just take those other provisions out.
And I apologize, but could you answer my first question? How does this make, and that was my fault because I wanted to.
Yeah,
sometimes
for sure.
I lose my train of thought here, but how does that make schools more autonomous?
Yeah, so currently schools, there's about 30% of your APR score that is based on the Continuous School Improvement process or program, the CSIP. And it's a very prescribed set of paperwork, and here's all the different methodologies and approaches that DESE is essentially saying, here is the process for you to follow to improve your school. And we believe that that is a lot of paperwork and a lot of compliance and a lot of administrative work that is being directed by DESE, and we believe that—
Who's going to direct this program that you're talking about?
So we believe that this is where we get to the autonomy piece, is we believe that the best way to go about this is to give local school leaders that autonomy to figure out the how. How are we going to improve our schools? How are we going to—
They currently have that now.
Well, except that there's this really big component of APR that is essentially giving those schools direction on how to go about the how. We believe that they should have that autonomy on the how while being held accountable to
who's going to score the schools then?
So the schools would be, so it would be based on your school achievement, your academic growth.
Who is going to score the schools?
Yeah, so it would still be based on those assessments that, yes, DESE is doing the assessment.
So DESE will implement this?
So DESE would continue to implement state assessments.
So there is no— the autonomy is not there. Okay, I was just curious about that part of it. That's really all I want. I mean, I know a lot about this. I mean, in general, I'm with you on this growth. I don't know that this is the particular model we should use, but I would more than happy to have conversations with folks as we go forward.
Love to continue speaking about it, Senator. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in support, please come forward.
Hi, good morning. My name's Melissa Finaro, and I'm from Kansas City. I come today as a concerned parent and citizen in support of the QEA. As a parent leader with Parent Leadership Training Institute out of Kansas City and working with Quality Schools Coalition, I've had a chance to work on this legislation over the last year. I've had the opportunity to engage other parents in Kansas City, and what we've learned and heard over and over again is that our current system isn't working for parents. The current system falls short in accurately assessing school performance and providing accessible information to parents. Navigating through the complexity and understanding of school performance can feel like a maze for parents, even for someone like myself who has recently worked in the Kansas City Public School District. I've had difficulty navigating the system currently, and we need it to be simpler and more transparent. This QEA offers a transformative solution by prioritizing essential metrics as like student growth, achievement, and readiness for post-graduation endeavors. It addresses the shortcomings of the current system. Clear and accessible report cards for all public schools will empower parents with the necessary information to evaluate school performance accurately. I believe that this piece of legislation is necessary in a step toward ensuring a better future for children and Missouri students. And I urge you to support this piece today. Thank you.
Seeing no questions, thank you for your testimony. Next witness in support, please come forward.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Stacy Priest, I'm representing Aligned. Aligned is a nonprofit organization comprised of business leaders who are interested in improving the education system. Their mission is to amplify the business voice and improve student outcomes and workforce readiness in Missouri. So with that, we are in support of Senate Bill 1366. We testified on the similar bill earlier in the session. Specifically, we want to highlight a couple of things. One, we like the fact that elementary schools and high schools are treated separately. There are different things that you would want to look at in an elementary school when judging quality, as opposed to when you're looking at a high school. When you're looking at a high school, you want to know if they're ready to go on to the next thing. And so college and career readiness plays a big role in these evaluations. The other piece is that it emphasizes the school's contribution to student growth. So those two particular things are the ones that we are focused on. Let's see if there's anything else I want to say. It doesn't, a couple of things about, it's very flexible. We like that too. It's more flexible, in fact, than in years past. It does specify the state's assessment and growth, but it doesn't specify that it always has to be the same assessment that it is now. If, for example, the state were to move to an interim assessment system and that became the one that they use, then that's the one, that's the one that they will use. The same with the growth model. I think the current growth model does a very good job of isolating what the school contributed to the students' achievement, but not necessarily just looking at a straight, year over year, how much did a student improve. So I think with that is everything I have, but I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, next in support, please come forward. Anyone else here to testify in support of Senate Bill 1366? Seeing none, those in opposition, please come forward.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Otto Fajan speaking again on behalf of Missouri NEA. We would oppose Senate Bill 1366. Just a couple quick points. The first one is we would caution against codifying what is a lot like MSIP 6 into the statute. The state board and the outgoing and incoming commissioner are really constitutionally directed to make those sorts of adjustments to that kind of determination. It probably needs to be done with the flexibility that goes beyond what the legislature can do. If this gets put into law, it may be a decade before it gets changed, and there may be a perception that it's, it was kind of the thing of the time, but it's no longer the thing of the time. So we would encourage that that something this detailed not be put into the statute. Our support on legislation in this arena has been for Senate Bill 814 and House Bill 1851, which doesn't have as many details, but it really does speak to realigning the structure. The structure is a bit of a mess right now and puts the department in a difficult spot. And so we think there are some bigger picture things that are not part of this bill but should be, that really are the things that need to be addressed. Those are the things about local control, about really pulling apart and being clear what's accountability and what's accreditation. Though this bill doesn't really touch that, it just kind of locks in place the particulars of today's process. For those reasons, we would encourage you, the committee, not to move forward on just this bill for sure, and to be reticent to put so much detail into a statute, but rather to really realign the broader structures and give that guidance to the new commissioner and the department going forward. Happy to work offline or answer any questions now.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, next in opposition, please come forward.
Hello, Gail Griswold, President, Camden School Board, and also representing Armorvine. I would implore everyone to understand how the growth model works currently through the MAP tests. And right now, I think it's been explained in the previous committee how DESE provides a predictive score for a student that even, you have 3 students that scored the same, but the next year they're giving a different predictive score for each student. And then so their growth is based on that difference. Yeah, excuse me, I was walking up the stairs here. So if you base it on a growth model based on a MAP test for one point in time, and you can't see the test before or after, it's an autopsy. We don't get the information until later, and the teachers and the local community can't react to actually help the students. You can't do anything with the information. So currently the MSIP 6 is a major problem. I would ask that that be further put under a microscope, but also the growth model is extremely irresponsible, and I can't imagine a charter school even wanting to be a part of that. That's actually pretty shocking. So the growth model, again, MAP test, you can't see it, and it is predictive, and we don't even know what's in it. It was adaptive at one point. We heard that changed. It's a moving scale. We don't know if there's how much non-academic testing is there with SEL and different very concerning items. And it's just a really horrible way to assess education, whether it's private, charter, or public. So thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Senator Beck.
Yeah, real quick. One of the folks testified earlier that this would give schools more autonomy. Do you believe that would be the case?
No. He said that he represented a special interest group for charters. I'm not quite sure what his experience is in autonomy of local schools.
Okay.
That are locally elected.
And you are a school board.
I am a school board president.
I appreciate your service.
Yeah.
Now, we probably don't agree on everything. We've had
I think
good
we agree
conversations.
on autonomy, and if
Yeah.
that's their goal, then this bill is. I wouldn't recommend anybody working in education that supports this bill.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else here in opposition, please come forward.
David Lee Brush, again, from Missouri Equity Education Partnership Action, and as an individual. As a 25-year veteran teacher, I know that the 100% threshold in the elementary school and the high threshold in the secondary schools is going to just lead to teaching the test again, and if you're only using one metric. Again, standardized tests do have diversity and inclusion issues in some of their questions, so we are concerned about that. And in the elementary schools, if you're only testing on ELA and math, then that's all that's really going to be taught. And while ELA and math are extremely important, if you're just teaching to the test, then social studies curriculum and science curriculum is going to be further marginalized than it already is in the elementary schools. And finally, if you're using EOCs as a test measure, then the growth is going to be skewed because some kids are going to excel on their ELA 9 test, but maybe not be so good in algebra. I may or may not be one of those students. So then that's going to show that I didn't really grow, but I did. We believe that a more equitable and a better model would be interim testing, leaving it up to local control, test students at the beginning of the year, the middle of the year, the end of the year, because that gives you data that it can drive your curriculum. When you get your scores back in October, they are all but useless. Thank you very much. I'll take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness in opposition, please come forward. Seeing none, anyone here for informational purposes? That concludes our hearing on Senate Bill 1366, and I'm going to hand the chair back over to the chair.
Please proceed when ready with the hearing for Senate Bill 812.
Good morning, Senator Trent, members of the committee. My name is Mary Elizabeth Coleman, State Senator for the 22nd Senatorial District, and I have a tremendous amount of information, but we have 10 minutes to present and a number of people who are here to testify and will have a chance to talk on the floor or offline, so I'm going to save my time for those who have traveled to testify rather than filibustering my own bill, as long as the committee isn't objecting to that.
No objection. I understand that there are some families that have traveled to testify on this bill. Could I get a show of hands of who they are? All right, please come up and begin in any order that that you would like. We'll go with favorable testimony first. And please keep in mind that we have 10 minutes remaining before we have a hard stop. Could you make sure that the microphone is on?
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Okay.
proceed.
My name is Carla Kearns-Dorn. This is my son, Russell Dorn. We're here from Kansas City. We represent ourselves and the National Federation of the Blind. We'll be very brief. This bill is important to us because of our own experience. Russell, how old were you when you hired your first lawyer?
I was only 5.
And why did you hire a lawyer?
Because I kind of had to for my education.
So we go to really an excellent school district in southern Kansas City, but blindness is the least common disability under IDEA except for deaf blindness. And so most schools may go years without having a blind child whose IEP they're going through. When he first came, they said he didn't need Braille because he has some vision. And then when we said, well, the experts told us he does, they said, well, our expert says otherwise. And we said, but okay, well then let's get a third expert. So we got another expert. They said he needed Braille. Long story short, we ultimately had to hire a lawyer to get them to listen. If they had required our consent, then it might have made a difference. It might have saved the taxpayers the money for their lawyer and our lawyer, because the truth is that that special education law already requires them to teach in Braille unless they can prove he doesn't need it. But in Missouri, you consent for the first IEP when the child turns 2, and they never need your consent again until they finish schooling at 21. The 10 states that do require consent have a much more collaborative process. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for that testimony. Any questions for this witness from the committee? Seeing none, thank you again for being here. Next witness in support from those that have traveled.
Good morning. Thank you for hearing me today. My name is Tracy Block. I'm with Missouri Disability Empowerment Foundation. Just to keep it very brief, I've had a very good situation with my school district. I have 2 kids on IEPs. I've never faced a situation where they would make a change without bringing me on board. However, as an advocate, that is not the case across the state for every district. There have been changes made, not necessarily having to do with the child's academic needs or achievement. And this bill would set up protections for those families. So as it is right now, when a change is proposed, it goes onto a document called a prior written notice. At the very top of that document, it says parental consent is not required for these changes to go into place. And then on the document, it lists out the changes and why they have to make them. And then at the end, you can sign it, but again, it says parental consent not required for this change to go into place. If I agree with this change, if this is good for my child, I know it's going to help, I can sign it, the changes will go into place immediately. If I don't sign it, it still goes into play in 10 days. And if I truly think this is not best for my child, I have 10 days to file due process. And that is expensive, that is horrific. It's the only way to make those changes pause until we can have a third-party officer look at this and say if this is the best decision to providing a FAPE for the child. So I'm happy to answer questions, but we have other families here. So.
Thank you for that testimony. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Next person in support. And if you could, those that are in support that have traveled to families, if they could get closer to the front so there's less lag time between testimony. Please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Diane Dragon. I am a mother who had 3 children with IEPs in the special school district in St. Louis. And as someone said, once we sign that initial IEP, we really have no choice what happens after that. In the case of 2 of my children, at one point I realized the reading services were just simply ineffective. I was paying for private tutoring and I asked to stop reading services only. That right was denied to me. We were told that our children would be forcibly removed from their general ed classroom to move to special ed for those minutes, or we had to get rid of the entire IEP. My children needed the other services. That required my husband and I to file due process for our 2 children to stop a service we didn't want. Ultimately, the special school district paid us over $100,000 because then they had to pay for our private tutoring when we showed their tutoring that their program was ineffective. After that experience, I left my career as a 16-year federal public defender to open up my own law firm just to help families like mine, because nobody's doing that in this state. I have over 50 clients who, many of which I wouldn't need to have, and taxpayers wouldn't be paying for school counsel if those parents simply had a voice in the process. So it is very important that our parents have a chance to say what happens in their child's education, to turn down services, to stop changes of placement, to get an attorney like myself within 10 days, to get on board and to file the case, to get into stay put is nearly impossible and just simply unaffordable for most families. So I will take any questions if any has any.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Thank you for being here and for that testimony. Next witness to testify in support. Please proceed when ready.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Yepes, and I'm a parent of a child who has gone through the special education system. My son entered the system in 2nd grade. As the years progressed, I found that I had less and less opportunity to influence the trajectory in school based on his potential. The school ignored their own IQ testing of him, and because of their inability to remediate his dyslexia, modified his curriculum incrementally until he was on a path for a certificate of achievement instead of a full diploma, which would have allowed him to go to trade school or college. I had to file due process against SSD, or St. Louis Special School District, on his behalf to stop this process. After a hearing, the commissioner ruled he had been denied a free and appropriate education. It was a hollow victory. SSD minimally followed the commissioner's ruling so they could minimize any potential to increase their services towards children with dyslexia. Ultimately, I had to file due process again in order to ensure that he had received a free and appropriate education. It is important that parents have a voice throughout this process to ensure their students' potential.
Thank you for that testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none. Next witness in support, please come forward. Proceed when ready.
Hello, good morning. This is my first time speaking in public, so bear with me. My name is Cynthia Emmerich. I am a mother of a child who has special needs. I am a wife to a 6th-generation farmer. I am a registered nurse with 10 years of acute care experience under my belt. My son attends Salisbury Elementary School in Sheridan County. I'm here to support this bill because I believe this bill would allow parents like myself to be treated as an equal member of the IEP team. From my experience, I have not always been treated as such. As a nurse, I knew that I would always be advocating for my patients who cannot advocate for themselves. However, I never expected to advocate for my son so he can receive a free, appropriate public education. This bill would allow me to decline services that I don't believe are appropriate for my child and to put the proof of burden on the school district. So if they so desire to choose to provide those services, I do not believe that any parent should ever hear from a special education director to say, this is the IEP that we have created for your child. You either take it or leave it. Unlike my son's school district, who has more than a $9 million budget for approximately 800 students, and the legal services of music behind them, we, as many parents, do not have disposable income to pay for legal representation to undertake a due process hearing. I truly hope that you take my testimony into consideration when discussing this bill with your colleagues and making decisions on this bill. I would be more than happy to speak to you about our family's experience in more detail. Thank you.
Thank you for that testimony. Questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for being here. Further witnesses in support? Can't tell who's leaving and who's in support. Please proceed when ready.
Hello, my name is Dr. Laura Wakefield, and I'm an advocate in private practice. And I own a national consulting business where I help school districts and families develop IEPs. I've dedicated the last 15 years of my life to doing that, and prior to that, I worked in public schools and special education for 15 years in Missouri, Texas, Ohio, and Kentucky. I have trained over 10,000 school staff and 4,000 families in all 50 states. I've also attended over 3,000 meetings related to IDEA, which is the special education law. I support this bill because it serves to provide parents and students an equal level of power as the school staff at the IEP table when making decisions about the child's education. When parents have heightened consent rights, school staff must engage in better consensus building practices with the parents. Consensus building methods are the research-based techniques recommended by the Center of Dispute Resolution in Special Education. And this research says parents must have equal power at the table for that to work. You've heard about the costly effects of due process from other people that have spoken today. There was research by the American Association of School Administrators in 2016 that showed that for due process, an average is $25,000 per case, and you also heard that payouts to families can range anywhere from $50,000 to $150,000. These cases can also be appealed up and in certain situations go all the way to the Supreme Court, where they can render decisions back down to lower courts for schools to pay out up to $2 million to families, which happened in the Injury versus Douglas County case. But I want to tell you quickly about another thing. It's called emotional capital, and that is devastating. School staff who go through these processes usually don't return, and they leave special education.
As you can hear, our time is quickly expiring.
Yes.
If you could wrap up.
And also it's very devastating for the families. They often have to either take their children out of public schools and homeschool them, or move to other districts to start over their relationship. I do have something, if I could pass it around, just to show what they were referencing earlier about all the areas.
If you have a handout, please leave it at the desk, and
Okay.
we'll be happy to distribute that to the committee.
Thank you.
Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Further witnesses and testimony for support?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chase Campbell, WIN Policy Group, going on record in support for Kids Win Missouri. Parents should absolutely have a voice when it comes to placing or withdrawing their child in an IEP.
Thank you for that testimony. Other witnesses in support? Seeing none. Witnesses in opposition? Seeing none. Witnesses to testify for informational purposes only? Seeing one.
Seeing one. I'll be
Please
very
proceed.
brief. Bill Gamble with the Special School District of St. Louis County. We have started discussions on the bill in preliminary. So we've made some suggestions to the stakeholders, replied back. We had a little quirk in the process. DESE promulgated a rule on Friday dealing with IEPs and entry, and we're trying to figure out how that all meshes with this. So we are in the process of working with the proponents of the bill. We have to take into effect state and federal IEP laws as we go through this process. But we are very sincere in trying to work on this bill, try to get to a solution. Don't know if we can or not, but but we're working hard at it, and we just got a little delay here
Pre-
as we figure out what's going on.
Appreciate that testimony. Questions for this witness? Seeing none. Any other additional witnesses testifying for informational purposes? Seeing none. That will conclude the hearing on Senate Bill 812. With no further business coming before the committee, we are adjourned.